What's up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about and reviewing the movie Mafia Mamma, which is a rated R action comedy starring Toni Collette as a woman who travels to Italy for her grandfather's funeral, only to discover that he was actually a mob boss and she has now inherited his empire. Honestly, I'm not even sure if this movie is still under embargo or not, but the screening that I attended was encouraging audiences to share their thoughts on social media, so I'm going to assume it's probably fine. The director of this movie is Catherine Hardwicke, who actually directed the first Twilight movie. That probably tells you where my expectation levels were for this movie. However, I'm always down for a good action comedy, especially if it's going to be making fun of organized crime type movies, because it's a very saturated sort of market within film. And this movie definitely has a very tongue-in-cheek feel at times. It's highly satirical, and it does even reference The Godfather multiple times. It was charming the first couple of times, then it started to get a little bit old. But right off the bat, I will say this movie's greatest strength is that there are certain scenes in this movie that are really funny. Toni Collette first arrives to Italy and she's totally confused. She doesn't even really know much about her grandfather, and her sort of uncovering the reason why everyone is sort of dressed up weird and acting so tough and serious. Meanwhile, she's completely unaware that they are the mafia. There are a lot of really good jokes as she sort of discovers what's actually happening. Toni Collette is awesome. I don't think I need to say that. She's easily the best part of this movie. She's one of the only real prominent cast members that I recognize too. And not just on a recognition level, I just think she's genuinely great in everything. Like, Toni Collette could be in a really shitty movie and still elevate it far above what it deserves. One thing that kind of just totally caught me off guard in this movie is that there are some really violent scenes, to the point where I was just totally swept off my feet. I was like, what? Is this the same movie we've been watching? But it sort of maintains that satirical edge during these scenes, so the violence works, and it's used to sort of generate humor in a way that's mostly successful. A lot of body parts getting cut off, and Toni Collette's character, Kristen, being absolutely just shocked and mortified. Kristen has these two bodyguards that sort of follow her around throughout the movie and protect her. They were great. I could have seriously watched an entire movie just about them, and I probably would have had a better time. Monica Bellucci was in this movie too. Sort of a strange performance from her, but she's probably one of the only other recognizable actors in this other than Toni Collette, and she was fine. With that said, there's a lot of humor in this movie that just really is hit or miss. Of course, there were those violent sequences that are funny, and just sort of the initial arrival to Italy where she's totally confused. But a lot of this movie to me just felt like Toni Collette hanging out in Italy, being horny all the time, and just being completely disinterested with her responsibility as the head of this big mafia empire. Granted, that makes sense. Like, obviously, a middle-aged mom who suddenly transports herself to Italy and finds out all of these things, all these sort of family secrets, of course she's not going to want to take charge of this organization. But she's disinterested in everything that they do for so long, to the point where it feels like it makes me disinterested in the film. And it's not until about halfway through the movie where she finally starts to embrace her situation, and we finally get some sort of refreshing humor to make up for those constantly repetitive jokes about Kristen wanting to get laid and stuff like that. A lot of the side characters really annoyed me. The bad guys, I guess you could say, are just this rival mob that they're sort of competing with. There's not a single interesting or funny character on that side of things. That really annoyed me. Of course, going back to the fact that this is directed by the same director as the first Twilight, there were a couple really cringy romance scenes. I assume some of it was done on purpose and it was meant to be funny. I didn't personally find it funny at all. It just slowed this movie down to a halt, and this thing is only like an hour and 40 minutes, so it should never feel slow. It should never feel like it's moving at a snail's pace, and it did whenever she was with this other dude that she meets in Italy. And there is a twist with her sort of romantic partner towards the third act that does, I guess, make sense in the plot. He's not just there to be a love interest, but I found a lot of their scenes together to just be really dull, and they distracted from the fun element. This movie could have been a lot more fun if it went full satire and just full humor and didn't try to be more than it should be. Also, the entire third act of this movie feels totally tacked on. There's a shootout towards the end of the movie that really feels like it could have been the perfect point to wrap things up. It almost feels like in editing they were like, oh shit, this kind of feels like a really brief anticlimactic ending, so they add on another third act to sort of top things off. Just didn't feel necessary to me at all. At that point, you know exactly how it's going to wrap up, and it just sort of lost that edge as it went along, the more it tried to repeat the same beats in the humor. So in the end, I think this movie really owes most of its pros to Toni Collette and the fact that some of the more violent sequences are pretty funny. There's no gut-busting sequence in this movie where you're going to be just laughing your ass off. The movie's not terrible, but it's quite mediocre, and I wish it was more funny. If it was more funny and just cared more about having a good time, I would probably give this higher marks, but for now, it's a 2.5 out of 5. Go see it if you're a Toni Collette fan, and if you're just a huge, massive fan of action comedies and you want to see something along the premise of this. But if you're not interested at all, I don't think this is going to win you over by any means. But of course, like all categories of film, humor is subjective, so I'm very curious to what other people are going to have to say about this. If you see it, do let me know down in the comments what you thought of Mafia Mama. Did you enjoy this? Was this just another sort of lame, dry humor attempt that can get added to the list of stale comedies that we've gotten over the years? Or did Toni Collette carry it and you would just watch anything that she's in and have a smile on your face through the entire thing? I wish I was in that camp, but this just didn't have enough to really keep me interested through the whole runtime. As always, guys, thanks for watching this video. Please hit the like button if you get a chance, and hit that subscribe button. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.